So if you don't mind, I'd like to shift gears now and maybe talk about this issue that you've been in the news for, and this is the Utah Lake Islands project.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people maybe have heard about this, but could you give kind of a brief overview?
Yeah.
What happened? You know, how this led to your involvement, and then where we're at right now, maybe?
Yeah, totally. So in 2017, right as I was coming back to Utah Valley, a pair of brothers called Todd and Ben Parker, the Parker brothers, they came up with this idea of transforming Utah Lake. And actually, I think that they came from a really sincere place. I interacted with them quite extensively over a number of years, met multiple times and talked about these things. But they had this idea, can't remember if it was Todd or Ben, had worked on some of these projects in Dubai, where they created artificial islands out into the Persian Gulf. And actually those projects ended up being very ecologically damaging and not economically sound, and human rights issues. But in any case, they'd only interacted with this kind of as an external consultant. And from their perspective, it's been a cool thing. They came back to Utah Valley. They were from the south of the valley. And this is just me thinking about their view. They wanted to build these islands, and they knew that Utah Lake had issues. Utah Lake has algal blooms. It's also lost many of its native fish and mollusk species. So like many water bodies throughout the world, in fact, about 80% of the fresh water bodies in the world are experiencing what we call eutrophication, overload of nutrients. And they started building a proposal. They submitted it to the state in late 2017, early 2018, and said, if you'll give us the land that we create, we're going to do the world's largest dredging project and build the world's largest archipelago of artificial islands, 14 times larger than the Palm Jumeirah in Dubai, just enormous. And I study aquatic ecosystems, especially lakes, and I saw the proposal and I was immediately very alarmed. You know, this didn't align with the principles of ecological restoration, and reached out to them and expressed my concerns. We spoke on a panel together at the Orem Public Library, and it's the way that things should happen. You know, that a proposal is made, and then the community responds. We consult with experts in the field. There's a dialogue, and then we make a decision. The issue was the decision on the political side had already been made. And in 2018, the state legislature passed a law that allowed the disposal or the giving away of these sovereign lands without any compensation for the people of Utah. And those sovereign lands have to be held in permanent trust for the people of Utah, present and future. So that's outside of my main area of expertise. I'm on the ecological side, but a coalition started to grow that was expressing concerns about this.
Was there evidence to show that law changed in response to this proposal, or not? Maybe it wasn't necessarily linked.
So it was directly linked, and this is pretty common actually. Laws don't just change by random. There's somebody that wants the law changed, either because they've been harmed by it, or they could benefit, or the community could benefit from a change. And so this group had approached lawmakers, the governor's office first, so on the executive side, and then also on the legislature side, and said, hey, we could fix this for you if we could just change the state constitution, you know, because the state constitution protects those lands. They're not federal lands; they're state lands. They're not even lands, right? It's water, but under the water body. Yeah. So, they had kind of. I don't know if they had completely ghost written the thing. That sometimes happens, where you lay out the legislation and then somebody sponsors it, or if they simply collaborated with the legislature. But there was a lot of coordination there. The law had been changed, and then they just were moving forward with the project. So we ended up interacting, and then the project went dark. We thought that it had died in 2020. Didn't hear anything about it. And then in 2021, kind of early 2021, we heard, actually this was a collaboration between BYU and UVU working on Utah Lake issues. We were trying to understand how the growing urban footprint in the valley is affecting the lake. And one of the researchers there said, hey, I was invited to this meeting. This island project is alive and they're moving forward. They had this big meeting with state legislators, and we were really alarmed because, again, we thought it had died. Organized quickly, started working on this, reached out to the island group, said, hey, could we meet about this? We found that the leadership had changed. It was another pair of brothers, Ryan and John Benson, that were working on this. And then that ended up being a much more acrimonious battle, because unlike the Parkers, who were willing to meet with us and share details and have even scientific and technical discussions, the Bensons never responded, and it was kind of just talking past each other.
Mm-hmm.
So a group of scientists and managers were working on this, expressing concerns, and then just kind of no response. Until January of the next year, 2021. So let me think. The life, it's been such a whirlwind. So it's 2023 now. Is that right?
That's right.
You can confirm this for me.
Yes.
2023. So it was in 2021 that, the very beginning of 2022 that I was sued. So we finally were going to meet, me, the Bensons, the broader community, at the first Utah Lake Summit. This was organized by Representative Kevin Stratton, my representative here in Utah Valley. It was being held at UVU. Well, the same day as this presentation, my wife calls me and says, hey, somebody just dropped off this lawsuit that you're being sued for $1 million for defamation for criticizing this project. It turns out we were totally wrong. We were actually being sued for $3 million for defamation, false light, and interference in economic activity. But we didn't even know enough to read the lawsuit right to know what was happening. And this was kind of a really clear shot across the bow to shut me up, and then also to just quiet down all of the criticism that they had received. A group of over 100 ecologists, engineers, environmental lawyers had signed on to this letter of concern that we'd circulated to the legislature, saying, look, we love the idea of private or public-private partnerships, but this is not a restoration project. What they're describing is not based in what we know about lake ecosystems. And so they did not appreciate that, and rather than kind of engaging in the American way, which should be open discourse, they resorted to the legal system. And long story short, this battle has extended over the whole year. Their project ended up being rejected by the state and rejected by the EPA and suspended by the Army Corps. So the system ended up working the way that it should eventually. And then all of their claims against me were dismissed just a few weeks ago. So feels like it's going in a good direction. But it emphasizes for me how important our scientific literacy is. And not only professional scientists like you or me, but every participating citizen, every legislator, every executive. We need to understand how do we ask questions? How do we weigh evidence, right? Because there rarely is agreement early on. But what's a decision criterion? When do we know enough to be able to act? What are times where we don't and we need to gather more information before moving forward? Because we wasted a lot of state resources. I mean, a $10 million loan guarantee was given to these guys, probably thousands of hours of state employee and legislator time was used pushing forward a project that was not viable from the beginning. We could have, if we had a more robust dialogue at the beginning, avoided that. So it's a unique story. It's not a unique problem. Right.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that when I followed your story on this, a little bit as from a little bit up from afar, but it reminded me just how there's a danger when a lot of money is involved.
Yeah.
And you can push legislatures or lobbyists or whatever it is for a particular thing, and if we don't listen to the best sound science that we have in regards to that issue, then we can go through this whole process that you went through, where eventually at the end it's like, well, of course we can't do that, or we couldn't, it's not feasible, or it's not the right path, or whatever, and we waste all of these resources in the meantime. But it's like that initial thrust of all of the potential money that could have been made
That's
by,
right.
by a few people,
Yeah.
because it's wasn't going to enrich me as a citizen.
Right.
We see that repeated in America and around the world, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
in Utah. Yeah.
And you're spot on, I think. They led all of their presentations, and we've now seen many of these through the lawsuit process with, we have $6.5 billion of private investment lined up. This is going to generate billions of dollars of value, each year, rather than asking, what does the lake need? What does our community need? And we pointed out that they didn't have any PhD scientists on their team. And it's not like a PhD is somebody that knows everything. That's a specific kind of expertise. They had good engineers on their team, they had good lawyers on their team, but they were missing that one core piece. And if it's a restoration project, that's actually the expertise you need to start with. And then you have the engineers and lawyers who are there to implement the plan once you've identified what needs to be done.
Yeah. So are you satisfied now then with where we're at? Do you think this is now kind of done with, or?
I think that the island project is not going to move forward. Actually, that night after they dropped off the lawsuit, I went up and talked to. They were there, and I thought, hey, I just want to be an adult and go talk to them. And so I said, hey, I got your care package this morning. Thanks for sending that. If you want to, we could talk about this, because I don't think it's going to reflect well on what you're trying to do. People are going to see this. I've been very careful about what I've said and tried to really research and be based in truth from the beginning. They unfortunately refused that, but it ended up being true.
Right.
This exposed to the public how they were operating their project. It's hard to understand. If I go off about limnology, the study of inland waters, and I'm like, the lake's going to become stratified, and you might have release of anoxic pollutants from the sediment. It's hard for people to understand,
Right.
Is this a legit project or not?
Yeah.
But when they see this multi-billion-dollar company so insecure and thin-skinned that they go after a baby assistant professor for bringing up some concerns, that reveals to a lot of people.
That really shocked me when I'm like, what? It just seemed kind of out there.
Yeah. Well, and the way that I am satisfied is I hope that that people realize we still live in a free country, and in fact. It relies on all of us to be willing to speak out when we have expertise in an area. I believe that comes with responsibility. And one of my fears engaging on this issue was that it would appear that it was all about me. Like, I want to be in the limelight. I want to be in the news. Oh my gosh, no. that was one of the hardest things of this whole process was constant interviews and media requests. But it needed to be done, right? And
how do you feel the media handled this here in the state?
I think that there was really good coverage, and again, it wasn't one-sided. There were plenty of pieces that were very pro-island, but there was good reporting that went on, and there's a really damaging narrative that the MSM, the mainstream media, just is totally unreliable. They're just making stuff up, and after having worked with I don't know, a good portion, maybe a third or a half of the reporters in the state over the past, 18 months or so, they are everyday normal people. They are dedicated to what they're doing. They're trying to help people understand what's going on. So we should always exercise our critical thinking skills. But this narrative of nothing is true, everything is a lie, has no basis in fact.
Yeah.
So no, I think they did a good job.
Maybe if we have some time, we can come back to your opinion on SLAP lawsuits too. We'll maybe jump ahead to a different subject.
Yeah.
So thank you for talking about the Utah Lake problem. I love Utah Lake too. I've sent you a number of pictures and some of the things that I think
some of your pictures ended up in our publications.
Yeah, I love Utah Lake. And so I am on board with what can we do to improve its health.
Yeah.
To improve, whatever we can do there. I'm in favor of all of that, but let's use the best science that we have to move forward with.